how do you evaluate success of a language training program? And what criteria do you use to compare success against? And how do you implement changes where there's need?
Well, let's say for one thing, maybe a country, you don't see many Macedonians in general English anymore. They're all getting 55 or higher. They're sending key people. They're sending people who are already motivated. They write in their, come by at the CETPP and the SANWeb, the FSN or the LES. We have the best program in Europe or something like that. I mean, they believe in it, and it's at the embassy level by Macedonia. That's what I've seen, to be honest with you. So there's that kind of pride.
What we do is so multifaceted. So yes, we're all SMEs in English language training and second language acquisition, but we also have to be SMEs at like creating SMART goals or measurable objectives. We have to be adept at sort of packaging or sort of relaying that information in a way that's communicable. So I think, just to circle back to that whole point, you create an internal system of measurement, right? Like you can't just sort of go down the road and just sort of let the weather be the determiner of your success. You have to know what your first milestone or benchmark is. With ELTP, I think that's kind of a little easier because you have the benefit of statistical driven testing, right? So we can say, well, you tested this many students and this was your pass rate. But it's important to create a tailored and measurable objective for whatever program you're running, because Macedonia versus Sao Tome,
gets a lot of attention.
but versus Sao Tome is one school. It's
Yeah.
one school. Two officers run that entire program. They are the managers, the teachers, the janitors. They fix the desks when they're broken. They go into the SANWeb and they check all the dates to make sure that they're ECLing people within the window of validity for the ECL. So their internal measurement system is not going to be Macedonia, Chile, Argentina, Europe, because of the scope and size of the program. But that doesn't mean that they don't have their own internal measures. That if they got the one guy to the International Maritime Officer Training course, that's a success. And if that guy successfully completes that course and meets all the requirements, that is a success. So those measures, you just have to find them as they pertain to your program, I think.
We've talked a little bit about the ECL and testing is important on these language training programs. How do you successfully implement policies that are unpopular?
I think a lot of that, to be frank, has to do with messaging. So it may not be, right, the policy that everyone gets free cake is a lot more, is easier to digest, no pun intended, than, okay, everybody has to, you have to do PT every morning, right? But there is a legitimate reason for PT, and so I think that, again, the rationality is important. So I ask, if it's unpopular, is it rational? Because if it's rational, I think that kind of speaks volumes, right?
Leadership. Both host country and stakeholders, people just buy into it, and then you reinforce it for a couple of years, and then it's part of the culture, that kind of thing.
I think that's a good point. I will say that I've seen that, especially with our Lebanese students and our Egyptian students.
Just believe in it.
And believe in it, and also there's a lot of modeling that happens too, right? I think that whole concept of leading from the front versus leading from the back. If you're the first person to take the hill, I think that speaks volumes. And I see that a lot with our Egyptian and Lebanese students who come back. They're very upfront, saying, well, no, I'm the one that has to demonstrate this. I'm the one that has to make sure that other people get this. So I think that speaks volumes.
And as a case in point, I used to proctor the ECL when I was the LTD. They didn't want to take it all the time. This is again in Skopje, in Macedonia, but I would study Macedonian while they were taking the tests, and they knew I was studying their language. And there was this kind of neat vibe I got. It made me want to, I just felt like I learned the language more. So that was a modeling type of thing. And for the ALCBTs, we created really neat kits. So they were ready to go in different colored folders and things. Just things like that, which showed a certain sort of statement, pride type thing.
But I do want
whatever you can do.
One plug though, because I believe this heavily. They're very, very heartfelt.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe that something is a bad policy or a bad reg, it is okay to attack that reg, right? That if it does not fit the need, if it's, again, not rational, it is okay to do a 360 and say, well, why is this here? Is this here because 2 commandants ago this was here? Is this here because somebody thought it was a great idea 10 years ago? Because we read it online somewhere? Does it fit us and our mission? I think that's a very important task and just comfort that any LTP manager has.
There was one at SRF Yokosuka, Japan, when I was there for 6 months as coordinator, interim coordinator. There was something, a policy of how fast you would cover one book. That there was great disagreement there between, because Japanese speakers take a long time, especially journeymen. These were non-college education Japanese journeymen, and there was disagreement between DLI and there about how fast you should cover one intensive book. And so rather than just slamming them and saying you got to do it, there were studies conducted. And one of our, after I left the LTD, just it took some time and tried different approaches. And with the Japanese culture that worked very well. And then they but I don't know what the results were, but statistically compiled what the results were testing and just how many weeks you should take to cover a book.
What encouraging mentorship would you offer those who lead our partner nation language training programs?
Attend the DLI ELC Melt Course. Read and educate yourself. Be as informed as possible. A leader, I think it's so I'm thinking to experiences in some former Soviet countries where there seems to be a bottlenecking of knowledge sometimes. As I understand that, is driven from a fear of job security, right? That if other people can do the things that I do and know the things that I do, what is my value? And that's dangerous, I think, to the success of any program, specifically something as complex as skills acquisition. I think that the best leaders come in and they admit up front what their gaps are, and they say, let me fill these gaps with guidance from the right SMEs, let me fill these gaps with reading and educating myself and the resources available. So that would be my biggest piece of advice is own your shortcomings up front and then identify how you're going to bridge those gaps.
I might respectfully ask the MELT student, she or he too could think about whether that's the job they really want or not, and are they willing to deal with some of the hardships, problems with language labs that don't work, trying to deal with competing resources, maybe 2 or 3 countries that are, you have to learn how to placate, for example, Australia and the United States and Vietnam, or British, during the 2000s in Yukon we had fierce competition between the British PEP programs and DLI. And so the managers were often trying to please both at the same time, and you can't always do that. You have to decide, how you could use both of them, to your advantage.
How did you successfully transition from your prior position, maybe as an instructor, to the manager position?
I was a manager in sales in a corporate environment, which was very difficult for years in Philadelphia. And so when I became a teacher, I already figured I had a lot of management skills. And so I was kind of lucky that way. I have a kind of a unique background with business management. My undergraduate was in business management and then the linguistics. And DLI taught me all about teaching, and that at DLI you have to be a good teacher to succeed. It doesn't matter what degrees you have so much. I think that's a very great thing about DLI. And when I became an OPM many years ago, there were a lot of things I didn't know, and I didn't know how to write as well as I do now, especially for tongue and quill and army writing and things like that. I just listened to people who knew. And I'll tell you what the biggest one was that I learned, because I was in Ukraine one time with a senior, now retired DLI civilian, and she said to me, make sure, because she knows I'm a little nervous, I had to talk for the Ukrainian leadership, she said, just make sure that you say it and believe it, and don't let them see any down on your face at all. And just, you have to believe in yourself, And the more you do that kind of thing, the more countries I went to, it became much easier to, to transform into more of a leader.
So one of the points that you just mentioned is it seems that if you're new to a leadership position, just accept that you're in a leadership position.
Yes.
Do the things that you need to do to accomplish your mission. It'll be a
Yes.
stretch. You will grow, but just do it.
I was in Kyrgyzstan, second survey I ever did, and I said, first of all, how do you spell Kyrgyzstan, right? I landed in an airport on the way, and I didn't know which country it was. What is this? It turned out it was Baku in Azerbaijan. I didn't know what that was. I mean, I knew I'd heard of the country. And then I saw I had to present my survey findings to the DCM. What's that? And the colonel got kind of like, yeah, we're going to go see the DCM. I said, who's that? Deputy Chief of Mission. Oh, that's the Assistant Ambassador. And she was nice to me, you know, and I did all right. But, you know, you just have to start playing it, because I didn't get training. It was OJT, or on-the-job training. In Armenia, when I was surveying there, I get driven around in all of these cars. You just get up, put on your suit, get to the car, and you're it. You got to be in that kind of job as an OPM, and I think as an LTD too. And then eventually you do it without thinking about it.
How did you adapt your manager style to fit the overseas environment?
You know, when we go overseas, we may not be leaders in the traditional or literal sense in the chain of command, but we get a lot, people defer to our expertise a lot, right? So knowing up front that's kind of, that I'm getting that deference, I think is really important to just sort of offer different alternatives and options, right? And to sort of be very clear about, well, my recommendation would be this, and here's why. I think I tend to just sort of rely a lot on reason, though, and again, sort of getting to the heart of what we're all here after. What is the goal? I think that when I think back to my time as a supervisor managing teachers, again, that spear analogy, right? If you're at the back end of the spear, I think it's really important that the further toward the front you are, the more information you're calling back, the more sort of updating you're doing. Okay, this is why I've asked you to do this. I didn't just tell you to put all those boxes in the corner because I wanted them in the corner. It's because they need to be in the corner so they can bring in new equipment or whatever. So just kind of conveying back as much as you know. Typically people, I feel and have found, and there is research to support this, they're always looking for autonomy, mastery, and measurement, right? So they want to know what their job is, but they want you to let them do it, right? They want to have a way of measuring their own success, right? And they want to know that they're mastering new skills or learning new skills or adopting new abilities, right? So I think also if you can kind of make sure that people that you are leading and directing have those opportunities, I think that just goes a long way in creating job satisfaction and encourages or incentivizes the adding of value, right? That, and I think that if you create an atmosphere of, you know, that there will be minimal punishment for risk taking, right? That it is okay to fail fast.
Environment.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that it is not a sort of hard and fast, and anyone who steps out of line will be punished. There is no one right way to interoperability. It's highly, as we know methodologically, it is highly dependent on the
Unless you're
learner.
driving in a convoy.
Well, yes, then there is one way. There is one way. But when we're talking about our students
Right.
and learning, there is no one methodology. And so whatever, so the road may wind and turn, but you know, you can get there many ways. And so let people explore those ways. Let people do their job.
I happen to just feel confident, maybe too confident sometimes, that I can read people well in just about any culture, especially as you go to more and more countries. So maybe use a little bit of personal charm and stuff and be well read. It helps a lot. And I'm very appreciative. The squadronization at DLI has made it easier for us to be SMEs. I don't think we were called SMEs for most of my career until Air Force came in and squadronized us and now recognizes us as SMEs. And we get write-ups at, you know, the wing level and squadron level and commandant level. This has been awesome.
Aaron, I like the qualities you mentioned a few minutes ago about allowing people to just do their job, but still giving them guidance. And I'm wondering what other leadership qualities do you think are essential?
Transparency, I think, is really important. Again, transparency again in what you are lacking, what you don't know, and what you do know, and the demand signal. Why are we doing something? Right? Where did it come from? That is really important. I think that you have to be comfortable shifting, right? That you can't be too married to an idea. So if you're not flexible or agile, I think that you're just in for a lifetime of consternation. Especially with people. Like, people are not one and dones, right? People and those relationships are ongoing, and they will mutate and change and morph. I think that you have to be really honest and enthusiastic about professional development. How are the people that you are leading growing and developing? What are you offering them to incentivize further and continued contribution? Yeah, those are kind of the big ones for me.
Well, and anticipation too, management, maybe even more than leadership. For example, as coordinator in Japan, we had a few American instructors there, and one was really brilliant, but sometimes got upset about things. And so instead of just letting it happen, I would read when that person might need a little bit of attention. So just get up from my desk, and a Japanese counterpart would say, "Where are you going?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm just going to go talk and sit down and talk about things." And so you're gauging people. It's a kind of empathy type thing, which I don't know. Some people do it better than others.
One other important aspect of leadership that I would like to mention is the importance of being strategic, or rising to the strategic level, right? Any leader at any level, be it a unit or shop level, an organizational level, an entire COCOM, why? What decisions are you making? What is the overall strategy? What is the impact? What are the second and third order consequences?
That's a great point, because respectfully, colleagues I've worked with here, I mean, I can think of some who I think were just really good tacticians at the tactical level, but didn't always exercise the strategic, which meant we just kept beating our dead policy over and over again, and we held it, but it might not have been the best one for a long time, years. And that was more maybe old school, DOI. So now we're getting a chance to use strategy where they, of course, helping us out.
And even looping that all the way back around to our discussion about, how LTPs managers can work with stakeholders, right? It's, again, get up to the strategic level. What is the impact of your ask, right? And I think that's also where you typically find common ground, is at the strategic level, right? So don't just tell me you need 100 desks. What are the desks for? How will the desks help your country's goals?
And we have to spend a lot of time in our jobs, just like a MELT student would in his or her country, with, in our case, DSCA and AFSAT and Indo-PACOM and all of the organizations, writing lots of emails and trying to figure out, what the strategy is and who sets the policy and then how we execute it.
So in your position as overseas program managers, you've worked with international military liaison officers, host country military and civilian officials, U.S. embassy officials, and DLI's country program managers and students. So what are your thoughts about the role and importance of security cooperation in DLI's mission? And then the other two questions are similar. How has your position as an OPM changed your perspectives about security cooperation? And then finally, do you have any inspiring experiences that have reinforced those key takeaways?
They've all been inspiring. I've realized how much I love the field, the soft power again, neutral, building groups, two nations who don't like each other much here at DLI in the same classroom. We've all seen that. Or again, going to a country and having inimical groups working together. The fact that every single country matters, every single country is exactly the same in importance from an English language training perspective. My mother says, "Why don't you go to Switzerland once in a while on your trips?" That's what she said to me. I say, well, sorry, but it's just as fascinating to go to any other country, whether it's big or small, whether it's not known. And if one of those countries has a problem, it triggers. Look at Yugoslavia, you know, that's why we need to make sure and help. There have been 2 world wars that have gravitated from that region. Kosovo, it's a huge, tiny little place, you know, so we have to realize we're dealing with all kinds of tinderboxes, and that we're taking care of ourselves. We're not doing it to be so nice. We're taking care of our country by keeping these things, you know, in line as best we can. I don't mean to sound like but by helping, for lack of better words. It's our foreign policy.
Working for the Department of Defense, we are, you know, the Department of Defense is in the business of war in 95% of its arenas. We are lucky enough and fortunate enough to be part of that arm that is all about peace and prosperity, right? And that is a real motivator for me every day, to do what I do and to deal with what I deal with sometimes, as we all do. That we are not in the business of blowing people up or you know, bombing things. We are in the business of resource pooling. We are in the business of combined efforts to achieve goals. We are in the business of cultural exchange and understanding, so that compromise is easier to achieve when the topics are very difficult and high risk. I look to our own wall of fame as a perfect example of that. We've had presidents, two former presidents of Egypt, we've had ministers and cabinet members from all over the world. These are people that do have their fingers on very powerful buttons and are hopefully, because we've all kind of done the work, a little less inclined to rely on that form of power and are able to look back to some language skills and functions and say, you know what, we can talk about this, we can negotiate something. I've worked with those people, right?
Yes, I mean, it's the hard power, but at the same time, we are war hawks, and there is, I think, you know, we have to realize this is a military training institution, and our Force has helped us with that. It's very important to realize. I've also realized that State Department, I've had a lot of fun working with state, and they're quite different than DOD. They do things sometimes different ways. I've seen a lot of embassies, a lot of ambassadors and deputy chiefs, and but a lot of respect for the risk that foreign service officers take out there, where they have to go too. So this OPM job is really neat, because in a sense, I feel like I'm a foreign service officer specialist for the DOD and DLI in a sense, yeah, which is pretty unique.